Okay, so what did you guys think of Nahum? Can you even remember? Not at all. Okay. Anna, can you come? That's extremely ironic.
What?
Just right when destruction says, destruction speaks.
I like Jonah better.
You like Jonah?
Sorry guys, just continue.
Okay, so actually, I pretty much knew you guys probably wouldn't remember a whole lot out of the book.
Yes.
So, since it's really we're going to go ahead and read it.
Yes.
And I'm just going to let you know ahead of time, we're going to read the entire book twice in class today. But right now, what I want you to focus on is, when we're reading, I know you've already done your first reading, so, we're done with that. Right now, I want you to be thinking, while you're reading, where is there evidence to give to when this could be written? Okay? It's super important for the book.
What's the question again? When?
When it could have been written. There are two, I'll go and tell you this later, but there are two possibilities. One is towards the end of Assyria, when there are the 2 or 3 weak kings, and the other one is before those kings, Ashurbanipal. That's how I say it, yeah. He's the last, great, strong king of Assyria. He ruled in Nineveh. He made a beautiful palace there. He was the one that did all that stuff to the city, made it beautiful. So let's read through it and just have that in mind. What are some internal evidence to help support either or? Okay? Alright, authorship. Not disputed, really. Nahum's the author of the book of Nahum. It says it in verse 1. No one really argues who wrote it. It's more of when it was written. And petty arguments like, where is Nahum from? So Nahum, the author, his name means consolation or counselor. Okay? The name Nahum is actually only seen in the Bible twice. Once in the book of Nahum, and once in the New Testament in Luke. These aren't the same name, it's two different guys, but interesting though, that Nahum in the New Testament is actually part of a lineage for Jesus Christ. So that's pretty cool. The name Nahum has also been found in some Phoenician manuscripts, so that's pretty much northern Israel area. Not Israelites, but same region as Israelites. Okay? So that's the name of Nahum. Where he lived, the village of El-Krash, or area of El-Krash, isn't known today. There are 4 different traditions or theories. Okay? One is a modern village near the Tigris, which is in the Mesopotamia area. I don't have it on the map, but basically up here, somewhere up here. See, this is the Tigris running along here, somewhere in that area. So I just went ahead and discredited this because he's giving this to Judah. All right, and the time that this prophecy is being given, Israel has already been exiled. It's proclaiming the destruction of Nineveh. It's pretty clear in the text, and he's giving it to Jerusalem. Yeah, he directs it towards Jerusalem and the city of David and such. So I don't see that as a very strong place for El-Krash. In the vicinity of Galilee, near Ramah, which is northern Israel, once again, it's a possibility, but I doubt it, mainly because he's giving this prophecy to the southern kingdom. Northern kingdom's already been exiled, so it's more than likely he not been in that area. Capernaum actually means village of Nahum. Apparently, I did not know that at all. But that is in the New Testament. You see Jesus be there. It is there a lot. So people say that that's where he's from, but more than likely no. I like to go with the fourth theory, which is it's a village in the allotment of Simeon, which is southern kingdom. So you can't really see on this map, but Simeon's like in the center of Judah. Remember when you guys did the maps during, what was it, Deuteronomy? Joshua? Simeon was literally just that circle inside of Judah. So southern kingdom. It's pretty solid. So I think that helps, especially with this idea that he's giving this. There are two theories as to when he gave it, and I told you guys that earlier, but both of them are after the exile of the northern kingdom. And this prophecy is an encouragement to Judah that your burden will be lightened. Kind of an idea. You'll be saved from this oppressor. Everyone who's been oppressed by this great terror called Nineveh will rejoice at her fall. It's going to be another destruction from the Lord. So, southern kingdom. Dating, okay, two possible times. Overall, it has to be given between 663 BC and 607 BC, okay? It has to happen, the prophecy has to have been given before the fall of Nineveh, unless you're an extreme liberal scholar who thinks that it's just someone writing about it afterwards. But it has to be after the fall of Thebes, because they have references to Thebes in the text. Does anyone remember where they saw that?
Yeah.
Chapter 3, verse 8. He talks about, do you think you like Thebes, or think you like Thebes, and Thebes fell. We're going to talk more about Thebes later on. I have a little video about it, but basically it was just a really powerful, protected, thriving city in Egypt, okay? And actually, ironically, one of the kings of Assyria is the one who destroyed Thebes. So it's like, in their minds, they're even better than Thebes, because they conquered it. Anyway, possible time dating. Okay, the prophecy given. Like I said, there's one possibility that it was given during the time of those last 3 kings of Assyria, when Assyria started becoming more internal and having to focus on different uprisings and breakings and stuff. And so during those times of weak kings, it suggested that because of that, all the vassalship kingdoms, including Judah, were able to get more liberty and pull away. And Nahum was, just proclaiming the inevitable because, they're getting freedom from Nineveh. But I like to go with this, that during the time of Ashpenopol, because of internal evidence, you see what Nori said in 1:12 when it says they're at full strength. I honestly don't think that he'd be giving this when they're not even feeling oppression from Assyria. During the time of those weak kings, they were having, to an extent, freedom and liberty because they were pulling away and there was nothing Assyria could do about it. So, I think it's during Ashpenopol. Also, the overall text, the flow of the book, it seems more that they're still experiencing oppression and vassalship under Assyria. And it's more about a promise to Jerusalem, to the people of Judah, that Nineveh will fall. So Ashpenopol, during the time of Ashpenopol, he was 3 weeks king. Anyways, Ashpenopol, he was the last great ruler of Assyria. After him, you had the lesser kings, the weak kings, and then Nineveh fell. Assyria was no more of an empire. But he was known for his military campaigns. He was known for being pretty much, the last greatest king of Syria. He was the one that destroyed Thebes. He conquered it. He plundered it. He just looked at himself as a great guy. He actually called himself ruler of the universe, or king of the universe. There's an inscription. There's basically a carving that they found, or a sculpture they found of Ashpenopol hunting a lion. It was a sport that kings of Assyria would do. They would go out into the valleys of Mesopotamia, into the fields and plains, and they would hunt the lions that lived there. And so this is an inscription on that was found with one of those sculptures of him killing a lion. It says, I, Ashpenazar, king of the universe, king of Assyria, in my lordly sport, they led a fierce lion of the plain out of his cage, and on foot I stabbed him, later with my iron girdle dagger, and he died. So if we could look at Nahum 2:13 real quick. It says, see, I am against you, says the Lord of hosts, and I will burn your chariots and smoke. But that idea of Lord of hosts, it could be taking that God's coming against Nineveh, and he's saying, you think that you are the greatest that there is, you think that you're the highest power, but I am. I'm coming against you, and I'm going to destroy you. Okay? Here's that picture. This is Ashpenazar. This is the lion. And, you know, like, he talks it up like he's this great guy who killed a lion with his iron dagger, but according to this sculpture, the lion's shot in the head with an arrow. So I don't know. I mean, still, it's pretty intense that he killed a lion on the foot or the dagger, but still, it seems, doesn't seem sporty. Okay, so any questions about Nahum?
When did you say the date was of the fall?
Fall of Thieves is 633. And that was, no, wait a minute, hold on. 6, that's what I said, yeah. 663, sorry, 663. So, Ashpenazar comes into reign at 669, and then in 663, he destroys Thebes. And then his reign ends in 633, sorry. That's when his reign is over, and that's when the lesser kings come into power. Yes?
So you're saying that it would have occurred before Thebes fell?
The prophecy?
Yeah.
After.
After
The fall of Thebes, but before the fall of Nineveh, obviously.
So between 63 and 30.
Yes, because the idea is that, okay, so officially on your timeline it'll say that Nineveh fell in 612. There was some debate a couple of years or so, but overall 612. Alright? But with the internal evidence that we're kind of seeing, that I'm trying to show you, is that it would have to be at a time when Israel's still struggling from oppression from a foreign leader. Okay? They don't experience that in the last 3 kings of Assyria too much. They don't really experience that a whole lot up until Babylon comes, which is after the fall of Nineveh. Okay? So, yeah.
And the time of the week kings was from 633 to like 612 or where it fell.
Yes. 609, 607, something like that.
So basically you're saying about the prophecy speaking to the people in Judah about the Nineveh. And the situation supposed to be Judah really feel very oppression intense from Assyria. So that's
Yes, Assyria seems to still have absolute control of all the vassal kingdoms when this prophecy is being given. Because the prophetic language is saying, you know, like, the oppression will be lifted, you'll be reestablished, God will look on you with compassion. But Nineveh, you will be destroyed, you will be cut off, you'll be attacked. So, the reason that they're cut off for the prophecy, or for the time it's given, at 663, is because that's when Ashpenazar's reign ends. 633. I said 63, but it's 33. His reign ends at 633. Thebes falls at 663. So between those two times is the most likely that the prophecy was given. Any more questions? Okay. The king of Judah at that time is Josiah, which also helps with this. Josiah's reign starts in 640 and it goes till 609. But Josiah's reign is the reign where they find the book of the law. He's the one that reforms Judah, tears down all of the idol worship in the temple of the Lord in the city of Jerusalem. He even goes up to Bethel and tears down the altar that Jeroboam, the first northern king, set up. He even tore down some of the high places built by Solomon. So you're seeing that all the kings before him didn't go as far as he did when it came to pursuing the Lord. And it also says in the text, if you flip to Kings, we're not going to really go there, but in Kings, basically, it says that he reestablished the Passover and that the kingdom had not seen a Passover like that since the time of Judges. So you see that this guy has favor with the Lord because he dedicates himself fully. He dedicates himself to the Lord once he finds the book of the law. And then he brings all of the elders and the people of the kingdom together, and they listen in the reading of the law, and basically they all dedicate themselves to God. And even though the Lord says that his wrath won't turn away because of the generations of wickedness and they abandon him, the Lord promises through a prophetess to Josiah that during his reign, basically he'll live his full life. It won't happen during his lifetime. So you can see that promise happening for Jerusalem. You can see that they're in God's favor in this prophet of Nahum. But with Josiah, you can also use that for the weak kings of Assyria, because his reign goes all the way to the fall of Nineveh, pretty much. So whichever one you find to be more likely, it's up to you. I personally side with the earlier date, just because internal evidence seems to suggest that Assyria is still in control.
No, just make sure you said Josiah's reign went on to be in Assyria?
Yeah, so Josiah's reign goes from 640 to 609. And in your timeline, it should, most likely it'll say 612 is when Nineveh fell.
Can you switch it back 30 and 18? Right.
Go back.
Let's go back. Thank you.
Copy that. Okay.
Yeah, so during the 3 week kings, Assyria was still like loosely in control, but they weren't really present anymore in Israel or attacking them.
Yeah, kind of. It was a kind of like they're decreasing in power, and they're kind of focusing more on internal things. It happens twice. You see that Assyria is really strong, and then I think it's during the time of Hezekiah. They have a couple of weak kings, and then Ashbenapul comes in, and he's that guy. And he basically goes back down, all the way down to Egypt, destroys Thebes, which is basically this huge center place for Egypt. It's a really important city. And then he goes back up, lives out his reign until 33, and then more weak kings come into play, and then Nineveh falls in 612. So either way that you choose, it's a pretty narrow time that the prophecy is given. It's either between the fall of Thebes and the end of Ashbenapul's reign, which is, I think, 15 to 20 years, or after, which is the same deal, it's like 15 to 20 years. So it's not a huge time frame, but it's two options. That's one or the other. Okay? Any other questions about dating of the book? Dating. No? No humor? Alright, we're going to go ahead and jump into the text, chapter 1. So this first part of the text, it starts to talk about the nature and the characteristic of God. Okay, so what were some things that you see just out of those first verse 2 and 3? Some things about God and his character, or maybe some things to describe who he is.
Jealous.
Jealous? Yeah. Cool. Okay, jealous. Avenging and wrathful, I have those. I didn't see jealous, but I should have. I'm sorry. Anything else?
Slow to anger, which is similar to what it says in Joel.
Yeah, slow to anger.
I like how instead of saying slow to anger and abounding in love, it says slow to anger and great in power.
Okay, so I have, rage against me, and then slow to anger / great power. Anything else?
Clear the guilty.
Yeah, does not clear the guilty. So these are kind of, you'll see throughout this prophet, kind of towards the first half, he jumps back and forth. You know, it kind of seems like he's talking destructive towards someone, and then he's talking graceful and kind, some destructive again, and it's like an interchange later on, but right now it's more focused on building up the idea that God is not just some weak God. He's wrathful, he's avenging. What you do, he'll come against you, kind of thing. If you're guilty, there's no way out of it. It's going to destroy you. All right? And then verses, second half of 3 to verse 5, kind of, he uses this imagery of just natural things, nature, anything like that. He got to name a couple that he used in the text. Whirlwind and storms, the first two that I saw. Wow. Yeah.
Mountains quaking,
Mountains quaking, I have that, yeah.
control of the sea.
Yeah. Control of the street. This is one that I thought was interesting, is destroys the growth of the land. You kind of see that, I think it's 4. Yeah, second half of 4. Bashan and Carmel wither, and the bloom of Lebanon fades. So, and then the last one comes out, mountains quake, and earth heaves before him, earth and all who live in it. So it seems like what he's trying to say is, our God, Yahweh, is not a territorial God. Everything comes under his order. He has control over all things. He is the God over all. He is the king of the universe, kind of thing. Okay? God's wrath and refuge. This is an interchange, real quick. It's, who can stand against his indignation? Who can stand before his indignation? Who can endure the heat of his anger? His wrath is poured out like fire, and by him the rocks are broken in pieces. And then the Lord is good. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He protects those who take refuge in him. Okay, and then the final one, it's wrath again. In the second half of 8, he will make a full end of his adversaries and will pursue his enemies into darkness. So, there it is. There's that part where it's like it's wrath, and then he's good. God is good. Wrath again, So what's it seem like Nahum's trying to get at right off the bat? It seems like he's throwing in a mixed messages almost. Do you want to have any ideas?
I mean, he's communicating wanting on God's side. So if you're on his side, you're refuge, but if you're not, you can't stay.
I think that's a huge part of it. I'm going to keep going because... okay, next part. This is the interchange, and basically it's just these little paragraphs. So the first one, A, is verses 12 and 13, is talking to Jerusalem. Verse 14, he's talking to Nineveh. Verse 15, he's talking to Jerusalem. Verse 1 of chapter 2, he's talking to Nineveh. Verse 2 of chapter 2, he's talking to Jerusalem. So let's just read that and just kind of see what he's saying to these peoples. Thus says the Lord, though they are at full strength and many, they will be cut off and pass away. Though I have afflicted you, I will afflict you no more. And now I will break off his yoke from you and snap the bonds that bind you. The Lord has commanded concerning you, your name shall be perpetuated no longer. From the house of your gods I will cut off the carved image and the cast edge. I will make your grave for you are worthless. Look on the mountains, the feet of one who brings good tidings, who proclaims peace. Celebrate your festivals, O Judah, fulfill your vows, for never again shall the wicked invade you. They are utterly cut off. A shatterer has come up against you. Guard the ramparts, watch the road, gird your loins, collect all your strength. For the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob, as well as the majesty of Israel. Though ravagers have ravaged, they ravage them and ruin their branches. Okay, so can you guys see that? how he's going back and forth in between the two separate people. It makes me think that Nahum's not giving this prophecy to Nineveh. He's giving this prophecy to Judah, to Jerusalem, about Nineveh. Just with that internal evidence, that's what you can do. Who's this prophecy given to in your BRI? I would definitely say it's to Jerusalem. It's not to Nineveh. It's about Nineveh and how they're going to be gone. But it's for Judah. It's for Jerusalem. Yeah, just squint a little bit. Do you have anything you want to say? Some thoughts?
I have nothing I want to say.
Okay. Any questions so far? Now we're pretty much finished with chapter 1. Flying through this.
Actually, I have a question. Okay. So you say that that's internal evidence that it is written for Judah. Then I feel like all of chapter 3 is kind of like directed toward Nineveh. Like, could that be used as evidence that it was written towards Nineveh, or no?
It's possible. When we get into chapter 3, you'll see that everything that he's saying, it's like a taunt. He's taunting them. He's saying that, you're going to be weak, you're going to fall apart, you're going to die. So it could be, but it could also just be him using wording and imagery to comfort Jerusalem and Israel, saying like, they may seem strong right now, but they're going to be weak and God's going to overcome them. They're going to, everything that he says in chapter 3, basically it's like, they look like this now, but this is what they're going to look like.
But he's not saying they, he's saying you.
Yeah, you. He's directly saying you.
To Nineveh.
To Nineveh.
Okay.
It's like, not exactly like this, but it's like if something was going on in the back of the valley, but you were right here, just to be a little more theatrical, you may look at whatever's happening and shout in that direction. But are you like conversating with him, you know what I mean?
No.
You don't know.
No.
Okay.
That's okay.
John, what means taunt?
Taunt? Like,
Like teasing, but like really harsh, like, right?
no, Sam's face.
Yeah, like provocative teasing. Yeah, like you're trying to start a fight with somebody.
Provoking.
You're like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like antagonistic.
Yeah.
Antagonizing. Yeah. And you're constantly, like saying things to get a reaction. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about it. I'm trying to find a good
The method I have for you is that the wording he's using, the way that he's proclaiming prophecy, is it's directed that Nineveh is going to fall.
Would this be like in maybe it would be next where he goes through all the nations, but we don't get to when each nation would say it. He's just kind of like going through in Judah, I guess, and then finally resting with them. Like he dressed them, but he wasn't actually. They don't actually.
Yeah. The idea is that the Lord is giving this to him, and he's proclaiming it as being given to him. It's a prophetic proclamation idea. So he may have not gone to Nineveh and said all these things to them, because honestly, he probably would have not made it back.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So, like the end of chapter 1 and like the very beginning of chapter 2 was like one paragraph, and it ends with, "Yeah, it's over, Judah. Like you're going to be cut off," and then it's like a shatter has come up against you. Is that like referring to what Assyria did to Judah, or is that like now regarding Assyria?
It's switching. It's talking to Assyria.
Like within the same paragraph.
Is it the same paragraph? I thought it doesn't change.
There's like a chapter divide there, so like.
Okay, I see.
It's
Well,
two sentences.
and honestly, in the English language, it's all together.
Yeah.
I'm sure that. I mean, I can't say 100% because I don't know Hebrew, but the idea is that when it's talking about peaceful and restoration, he's focusing towards Judah. When it's talking about destruction and no survival, it's talking about Nineveh. These are the two characters in the book, Jerusalem and Nineveh. One is going to be restored by God, one is going to be destroyed by God. Yeah?
And it does seem like that, that is towards Assyria, just from like the verse below, of it almost answering why this thing or nation needs to guard the ramparts. It's like, for the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob. Well, if the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob, like, why is it like telling them, a shatterer is coming up against you, I'm restoring your majesty, you know?
No.
So it does seem to be like, no, Assyria, you need to like collect your strength because I'm restoring the majesty of Jacob and you're going to be destroyed in that way.
Yeah, the idea is that there are two parties receiving this prophecy. One is the one that's going to get the good side, but one's going to get the bad side of it. So even when we get towards the end, when it's just focused on Nineveh, it's still the same idea that Nahum's in one spot, and he's proclaiming this prophecy, and it's for Judah as a reassurance that God's going to take this oppression off of you. He's going to restore you. He's going to restore Jacob and Israel, because he's going to destroy Nineveh. That's kind of the idea, you know. If we take everything literally when it comes to prophets, it becomes very hard to interpret and explain things, because if that is the case, he's giving these prophecies to Judah, then he has to go to Nineveh and give these prophecies to Nineveh, and he's going back and forth. And I don't know if you can see up here, but Nineveh is up here, Jerusalem's down here. It would take a while to get there. That's not even a big deal. It's like I like to struggle at looking through stuff.
I think the way I see it, because it's the poetry, you're really looking back at the poetry, like when we're reading a song. Most of the people that write it, they have the imagination person in front of them, is speaking to the air, which is not really there. So this is the basic, that way I see it. It's like poetry. They have an interchange, A and B.
Yeah, and it's really what it comes down to is when he's giving this prophecy, it's not that he's literally going and giving it to Nineveh. It's that he's giving this prophecy to make it clear that God is against Nineveh, and that they're going to be destroyed. That's the answer I can give you. It may not be satisfactory, and I apologize, but that's all I got. All right, so are we ready to move on to chapter 2? From here on out, the rest of the book is pretty much about Nineveh. It's about how it's going to be destroyed. So, it's actually very nice that you segued into that, because that's where we're going. But he's using a lot of imagery. He's taking things that's about this city, and he's turning it against them and making them realize, or to show how, like, everything that they put their stock in is their downfall, pretty much. So, let's see, starting chapter 2, let's talk about Nineveh. I completely forgot I was going to do that. So here's Nineveh, the city. It has 15 gates, is that what I said?
Yep.
Yeah. Here's the big things about it. It's a pretty sweet city before it was destroyed. But the city, it's the way that it's designed is it's a pretty good stronghold. Their water source is a river that's flowing through, so unless someone dams up the entire river, they're set on water. They have a moat that allows them, better defense. The city is just huge. This is really big. It's right next to the Tigris River. Key location. It's in the plains of Mesopotamia, I'm pretty sure. And so just for the city, basically it's really easy for the city to thrive economically. But I wanted to go ahead and read a explanation of how the city was destroyed. And then as we go through the text, we may be able to compare and see how Nahum's prophecy lines up with how the city was actually destroyed, or how they think it was destroyed. So there are two ways that the city was destroyed. One is a flood. In April of 612 BC, during the annual rain, the Tigris flooded, its banks more than normal, and the city flooded. The rushing waters pounded the city walls, eventually crumbling them, then rushed into the city, flooding it, killing tens of thousands of people inside. This also created an easy entrance for the enemy into the city. Okay? And a second way that the city was destroyed, this is the overall city, was through fighting. In 612, the Medes and Babylonians allied to fight against Nineveh. The Assyrians sought help from the Scythians, something like that. But I think when we went through Kings, and he talked about how basically the Scythians were like the only people group that were worse than the Assyrians when it came to fighting and gore and fear factor, and they actually turned against Assyria and helped the Babylonians and Medes conquer the city. So Babylon was, Assyria was just destroyed. Okay, so this is pulled from an article that's called The Luck of Nineveh. And so this is what he, through just studying archaeological finds and history, his conclusion of how the city was destroyed. Okay, the Babylonians rose in revolt and proclaimed their independence as well as the Medes. They joined in alliance and marched on Nineveh. The king of Nineveh summoned help from the Scythians, which is like asking help from the wolf against the dog. The Assyrians, by comparison with the Scythians, were nothing in their cruelty. The Scythian warriors still drank the blood of their enemies, made drinking mugs out of their skulls, cloaks from their scalps, skinned them, and used their skin as napkins. In some instances, the Scythians flay the right arms of their dead enemies and make of the skin, which is stripped off with the nails hanging. What do they make out of? Quivers. They're pretty gross guys, but they used it to cover their quivers. In any event, the Scythians betrayed the king and joined the Babylonians and Medes as they descended on Nineveh. This author thinks the sudden flooding was the rebels' strategy of diverting the waters of the Tigris to flood Nineveh. In order to avoid capture, the king built an enormous bonfire in his palace, heaped upon it all his gold and silver, as well as every article of the royal wardrobe, and shutting his concubines and eunuchs in the room with the pyre, he consigned them and himself and his palace to the flames. It was only after the flood that the fighting entered into the city. And then the third way that it was destroyed was more centered around the palace was by fire. Knowing that he was defeated, King Sardanapalus gathered all his gold and treasures into his temple along with all of his wives, concubines, eunuchs, and then torched it to the ground, killing himself and everyone inside. So there are three ways that the city is destroyed: flood or water, fighting, and fire. A triple F. Flood, fight, fire.
How does they have a zoo?
Yeah, so the city, I think it was during Ashpenazar's reign, he built up the city, made his place of grandeur and amazing. It had a zoo, it had an arsenal, or I guess I should say like barracks and armories. It had his palace, it had several temples and temple mounts, a zoo, gardens, a lot of stuff. It was a pretty cool city, but it was destroyed. I don't know, is it a part of the eight wonders of the world? I don't think it is. I think it's Babylon.
Babylon, yeah.
So I don't know why it didn't make it in there. But it did. It is Babylon.
You say there are three ways: flooding, fight, and war.
Fire.
Fire.
The palace was destroyed by a fire that the king started himself. Alright, so we're going to get into this. assault on the city. In this first part, he kind of talks about basically a raging force that's against the city. Does anyone want to read this, verses 3 through 5?
Nini.
Okay.
The shields of his warriors are red, his soldiers are clothed in crimson. The metal of the chariots flashes on the day when he musters them. The chargers prance. The chariots race madly through the streets. They rush to and fro through squares. Their appearance is like torches. They dart like lightning. He calls his officers. They stumble as they come forward. They leap into the wall, and the mantlet is set up.
Okay, does anyone have any idea what a mantlet is? I didn't either. I was confused. Like, what is this? Really, it's the wording that they chose. Basically, means to block or to hold against, like to push away, to fence off, stop an approach. And the word that the original Hebrew word is kak. Pronounced in English. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but that's how that kak. Okay. All right. So that's the first part. Next part. City defenses. Who wants to read? We already read those. Keep going. Summary. There's the whole thing about mantlet. Okay. City conquered. Verses 6 through 9. Who wants to read those?
I will.
Okay.
The river gates are open, the palace trembles. It is decreed that the city will be exiled, its slave women led away, moaning like doves and beating their breasts. Nineveh is like a pool whose waters run away. Halt, halt, but no one turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. There is no end of treasure, an abundance of every precious thing.
Okay, so we see it talks about flooding here, it talks about people exiled, it talks about treasure being looted. Okay, minus the flooding thing, can anyone see how this this could like line up the Assyrians, kind of like opposite what they would do? They would go in, they would attack a city, they would exile the people, they would take the treasures of the city. So it's like when he's proclaiming this, it's going to be a reversal. I don't have coffee, it's cold. All right.
What you're saying is when Nineveh would go in and attack, this is what they would do. They would exile.
No.
And
So
then-
this is a Nineveh attack.
Right, but then it's a reversal on them of what they do to others.
Yeah. So basically what goes around is, how do you say it in pothead terms? The line's been, it's hot in here, can you turn it right up? Okay, who wants to read 10 through 13? Okay.
Devastation, desolation, and destruction. Hearts faint and knees tremble. All loins quake. All faces grow pale. What became of the lion's den, the cave of the young lions, where the lion goes and the lion's cubs, with no one to disturb them? The lion has torn a nut from his whelp and strangled prey from his lionesses. He has filled his caves with prey and his dens with torn flesh. See, I am against you, says the Lord of hosts, and I will burn your chariots in smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall be heard no more.
Okay, so here he's using the imagery of lions, lion's den. Lion's den is destroyed. God is the Lord of hosts. God has killed the lion. So not only did the kings of Nineveh hunt lions as a sport of kings, they also consider themselves to be lions. Sort of a metaphorical imagery.
Who's the lion is their fucking mascot?
Yeah.
It's like represented Assyria.
Yeah, the lion represented Assyria. In the plains of Nineveh, pretty much, that's where the Mesopotamian lion roamed. Dan talks about them kind of like that, and that they didn't really go extinct up until, what was it, the 17th century, something like that? So these lions were hunted for sport by the kings. It was a kingly sport. But it was also, the pride of their nation. We're lions. We go out and conquer, and no one can come against us. We're the mightiest of the mighty. And I think you'll see this imagery of a lion pop up again when you go through Daniel. And it kind of plays a part in that prophetic thing.
So basically, you say Assyrian to apply Assyrian's army as a lion.
The lion, like the lion, I guess you could say a male lion, was, like I was saying, the mascot of the nation. They were the lion that went out and conquered people. So whenever the Bible talks about a lion, it's not referring to the Lion of Judah. More than likely, they're talking about Assyria, or the king of Assyria, the conquering force of Assyria. So whenever a city or a empire, in this case, went out against someone and they won, the glory was given to the leader, their king, for the victory. It wasn't given to his army or his armies. It was his accomplishment, what he did, because he was the mastermind, he was the king, he was the leader, he was the one who got the glory from it. And everyone took pride in their king or their leader for being such a great leader. So you don't really, you see when it's more talking about victories, it's the accomplishments of one man when they talk about it. You'll see through different texts that they've found for Assyria, whenever a king quotes about the accomplishments, it's always his accomplishments, what he has done against other nations. He never really talks about his armies. He talks about, like when Sennacherib, who came against Jerusalem? He came against Judah, and he was going to attack Jerusalem, but he didn't. His army went and got destroyed by God, and then he left. But when he came back, you guys have seen this. The text he's talking about his conquest talks about how he pinned the king of Jerusalem like a bird in the cage, like, I did this, yada, yada, yada. So, normally when there's anything, it's about one guy doing one thing. It's never his army that did it or anything like that. Okay, so now we're moving more into imagery of Nineveh being destroyed. Okay, so the first 3 verses, 1 through 3, is the image of battle. Who would like to read that?
I can read it.
Okay.
City of bloodshed, utterly deceitful, full of booty, no end to its plunder. The crack of the whip and rumble of wheel, galloping horse and bounding chariot. Horsemen charging, flashing sword and glittering spear, piles of dead corpses, dead bodies without end. They stumble over the bodies.
Okay. It's pretty hard. I think so. But yeah, he basically is just describing what it looks like to be a city that's being conquered. It didn't be a city that's being conquered by Nineveh or Assyria. When they would go in, it was just chaos for everybody. But now it seems it's like the same, coming back around. Goes around, comes around. And then he kind of uses the image of a prostitute, and he says that Nineveh is a prostitute and you'll be disgraced. Does anyone want to read that? 4 through 7.
I will.
Okay.
Because of the countless debaucheries of the prostitute, grace-ruling, alluring mistress of the sorcerer, who enslaves nations through her debaucheries, and people through her sorcery. I am against you, says the Lord of hosts, and will lift up your skirts over your face, and will let nations look on your nakedness, and kingdoms on your shame. I will throw filth at you and treat you with contempt, and make you a spectacle. And then all who see you will shrink from you and say, Nineveh is devastated. Who will bemoan her? Where shall I seek comforters for you?
Okay. And the third part is compares Nineveh to Thebes. So we'll read that, and then I've got a little video of basically the archaeological find of Thebes. So who can read 8 through 10? Who will?
I will.
Hold on. 9, sorry, just 8 and 9.
Are you better than Thebes, that sat by the Nile with water around her, or ran from the sea and watered her wall? Ethiopia was her strength, Egypt too, and that was up the Libyans, Put and the Libyans were her helpers.
Okay, so this is basically just what they found of Thebes. Real quick, I should say, Thebes was destroyed by the Assyrians, and then later on it was built, restored, but it wasn't at the glory it was before it was destroyed by Assyria. But this will give you an idea of like how magnificent it is. Uh-oh. Please try again later.
I don't know what you've been hearing, it's pretty shy.
No, that's true. Okay, forget about that. Bottom line, Thebes was pretty cool. Oh! But yeah, Thebes was just, it was a city that was amazing. It was pretty much at its time the center of Egypt and all the area around. You see, it talks about Put, Ethiopia, Libya, Egypt. Everyone went to Thebes. It was huge for commerce. It was, I think, on the Nile, like, basically it was this island city, and all around it was just water. So it would have been really hard to attack to siege the city just because of the way it was built. What the Assyrians did. Okay, moving on. So, 10 through 13. Oh. My conclusion. It's going really slow, I'm sorry. Okay, 10 through 13. Conclusion, Nineveh is weak and will easily be taken by your enemies. Okay, so this is where like the taunt becomes very clear, it seems. Nahum is really getting at the point that you're going to be weak. You think you're so mighty, you think you're so strong, you think you're like a lion, but really, you're going to become weak, you're going to be destroyed. God's going to destroy you. So I'll go ahead and read that real quick. Yet she became an exile, she went into captivity, even her infants were dashed in pieces. At the head of every street, lots were cast for her nobles. All her dignitaries were bound in fetters. You also will be drunken. You will go into hiding. You will seek a refuge from the enemy. All your fortresses are like fig trees with first ripe figs. If shaken, they fall into the mouth of the ear. Look at your troops. They are women in your midst. The gates of your land are wide open to your foes. Fire has devoured the bars of your gates. So that first verse 10 was still talking about Thebes, I apologize. But it was talking about it and how they were led away by the Assyrians. And just like Thebes, you will fall. You're allowing your pride and your strength, or what you think you have as strength, to deceive you. In reality, you will fall before God. Because He is the Lord of hosts. Okay? And then he goes in to talk about the defense of the city, which is the last part of the book. First part, 14 and 15, talks about ready your defenses. Who would like to read that?
I will. You can read it. Draw water for the siege. Strengthen your inner fort. Trample the clay, tread the mortar, take hold of the brick mold. There the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you off. It will devour you like the locust.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far, like about the actual text? Is anything either not making sense to you, or you want to comment about, or anything like that? Wow. We've all already become Bible scholars. Okay, Laura, can you read verse 17?
Your guards are like grasshoppers, your scribes like swarms of locusts, settling on the fences on the cold day. When the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they have gone.
Okay, so that portion he's comparing them to grasshoppers and locusts. And when I initially read it, I was thinking like, oh yeah, just from my common knowledge of grasshoppers and locusts swarm together and make this huge destructive mass. But grasshoppers seem to be like loners, you know, they're not really moving up together, they're kind of their own deal. So it's like, their soldiers are like grasshoppers, they're few, but then their scribes and all these other people are just massive swarm of words. But I don't think that that's actually a good interpretation as well. I'll leave that up to you. That's just my common contributory knowledge of grasshoppers. Okay. All right, and then the final section of the book is there is no rescue, verses 18 and 19. Lord.
Why do you think in verse 11, he uses, you also will be drunken as like imagery for how they're going to be dashed? Like they just won't be strong, they'll be wobbly?
The best thing, yeah, I think the best thing that I have for you is the thing that Thebes and Nineveh shared together is they were both pretty much capitals, not just of nations, but also economically. They were thriving very well, and the idea of someone actually attacking them would have been far-fetched. You know, Babylon tried and they failed, but the idea with Thebes is they weren't expecting to be actually conquered. And when they were, it was, you know, they were caught off guard, they were overwhelmed, they were destroyed, they were let off. And so the same idea could be for Nineveh. Nineveh wasn't expecting anyone to actually attack them. And if they did, they didn't expect them to actually succeed. You know, they're the lion, they're the greatest empire in the world. Their kings think of themselves as rulers of the universe. Kind of a deal, you know. So the pride that they have in their accomplishments, and the safety of their walls and their military strength is what they're relying on. Because they rely on that, and it also is their weakness, their weak point, because they don't expect an attack that could actually succeed. So when an actual threat comes, they'll be caught off guard. That's the best I have. Okay, 18 and 19. Who would like to read that? The last two. All right.
Your shepherds are asleep, O king of Assyria, your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains, no one gathers them. There is no assuaging your hurts, your wound is mortal. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you, who has ever escaped your endless cruelty.
Okay. That's the end of the book. Basically, the conclusion is kind of what we started out with. Like, you can't escape this wrath of the Lord. No one's going to help you. You know, it's like, when that guy gave it, when I read that description of how the city was destroyed, Syria did try to get help from escaping them, but they just turned around and attacked them as well. So it's almost like, you know, this prophecy that Nahum's giving is just giving a very detailed outline of what actually happened, you know, in a prophetic way. He's using analogies and symbols and metaphors, but in reality, we know that the city was flooded, we know that the city was attacked, and we know that the king burned his palace. And we see all these images in the book. We see that no one comes to the aid of Syria, but everyone comes against them, and everyone rejoices in the fact that Nineveh is destroyed. Okay, so that's the book. I want to talk to you about the assignment, but first I want to go into a little bit of an application for the book. The reality is when Nahum's giving this, at least from my conclusion of the study, is Judah is doing their best to pursue the Lord, and they're under oppression, they're under this overwhelming power of, sorry, I'm going to turn this off, black button. Black button. Oh, wow, it's turned off. But they're under this oppression of a foreign nation, even though they're trying to pursue God. But the promise in the text is that there is restoration. And it's always reassuring to hear that in today, in the world that we live in, because even though that, the word of the Lord is going out, all of us here have dedicated our lives, this time of our life, to know God and make Him known. That's what Wyland's all about. And many other missions organizations are all about that too. We see and we hear about all these awesome things that are happening in the world. The outreach teams that we have right now that are in Asia, the things that they're doing, the things that we've heard about in the past, the excitement we have for the future. Like the word of the Lord is being known. But we have to remember that it's at a huge price too. Because with every awesome revelation or truth that we hear about, there's pain, there's persecution, there's torture. Like I saw this morning, right now there's something going on in Congo and people are dying because they can't get along or something like that. It's super unfortunate. And it's really sad to hear that people are killing people. More than likely there are Christians that are in the midst of that who are trying to do something about it, but they can't, And a couple of months ago with the ISIS thing and Christians were being beheaded like this. We don't even think that happens anymore until we hear about it on the news. The idea of someone being beheaded simply because they don't believe in what the other person believes in is monstrous. It's crazy. So the reality is that we are persecuted every day. And what we feel as persecution may not be as much as what other people in the world are feeling. But we do go through it, and it's hard to have a positive attitude about it. Some guy flicks me off or tells me to get lost or just treats me very mean because I'm just trying to pray for him. And it's like, dude, I'm just trying to share the good news with you, and you're just so mean to me. And I automatically start making it about me. I completely forget about the promise of God. I'm just saying, you were going to enter into eternity with me. You're my son. I redeemed you. I've adopted you. I brought you into my keeping. And I'm never going to let anything happen to you. Okay? I'm going to be with you forever. It's going to be awesome. I think about those things when I'm alone, when I'm praying to God. But then when I'm actually out trying to further the kingdom, it's always about me. I always end up making it about me. I don't want to listen to the promise that's been given. I don't want to trust in God that salvation is coming, restoration is going to be completely fulfilled in His time. Jerusalem, Josiah, they knew what they needed to do. And they did. They tore down all of the idols. They destroyed everything that was against the law given by God. And they earnestly sought Him. And in that, there are rays of hope given that you will be restored. Pursue me, you will be restored. And it doesn't happen in Josiah's lifetime. It doesn't happen in that generation that turns back to God. It doesn't happen until, hundreds of years later when Jesus comes. To an extent, it kind of happens when Persia allows them to come back and rebuild the temple and the wall. But it's not to the volume, it's not fully restored. It's like a partial completion. But then when Christ comes, you see that full restoration to God. Like, there's no more separation between man and God anymore. God's closed the gap. But what about Josiah? He's back here and he did all this work. He gave up so much about what was easy to do in the world he was in. And he honestly sought the Lord, and then he died. He didn't see the fulfillment of what the promise was. And that happened before Josiah, thousands and thousands of years before him. And then today with us, we're waiting for Jesus to come again. We're waiting for the fulfillment to where there'll be no more sin, there'll be no more pain. And hundreds of people die every day that believe in that, and we're trying to see that fulfilled, and they don't get to in their lifetime. I don't know if I'm going to get to see it happen, in my worldly lifetime. But I can't make it about me, because it's not about me to begin with. That's what I got from this book of Nahum. There is a promise of restoration. But if I think that promise is just for me, I'm just going to get frustrated with it. It's not for me, it's for humanity. If I'm selfish, you know, I'm not gonna get anything from it. If I'm selfless, I get to see the glory of God in others' life. I get to see you guys grow closer to the Lord if I sacrifice what I want to do and make sure your needs are met, make sure that you're getting everything that you can get. That's when I find joy, that's when I get joy, is helping you guys. So that's what I got from this book. What you get from it or don't get from it is up to you.